Okay, welcome again. Once again, we're going to try this again. Class of Civilization. The German, the Asian, and the Negro about to talk about society and politics, so enjoy. This might be interesting. Okay, you want to introduce yourselves again?
Do you want to go first?
No, Klaus can go first.
Okay, well, I'm Klaus Meller. I'm the aforementioned German. Yeah, not much interesting about me. I'm working on a blog right now, but I don't really have anything written for anyone to check out or anything. I mostly just shit post on Twitter for the time being.
Okay, well, I'm Ray, obviously, as you can see. I'm the aforementioned Asian, and I guess I've been invited on to give my opinions. You can find me on Twitter most of the time. I'm usually talking about accelerating the development of productive forces, in between perhaps shilling for natural gas, as I'm often accused of. I guess that's a good enough introduction as I can come up with at the moment.
And me, I'm just like the Negro. I have no civilization. So, okay.
Also, gotta love going for the honesty at the outset. See, I can't be accused of shilling for natural gas if I just literally admit to it at the beginning.
I'm sorry, what was that? I walked away from my computer for a second.
Okay. What's going on with Britain right now? I heard there was like a nerve attack,
Nerve agent.
Nerve
agent.
You're looking for. Someone has engaged in using a nerve agent in Salisbury. And yes, I'm pronouncing the name of that town wrong, but I refuse to not pronounce it the way that it's written. So there you go. But someone used a nerve agent in Salisbury in order to take out one Russian ex-spy who had defected and hit about 30-something people along with it. And of course, we know it's Russia because the only people who possess that particular agent, Novichok, which is a binary agent, because it's easier to smuggle a binary agent into NATO countries than to smuggle a literal, fully assembled chemical weapon. So it seems kind of obvious that it comes from Russia because they're the only people who actually know the formula for how to make Novichok. So
are you sure that they're the only people that know how to make it?
Pretty much.
I thought I was reading something about declassification, about the information about how to make it. I don't know, but
well, who would have declassified it? Would Russians have declassified it so that we could see it? I somehow doubt that they would do this.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure they have not done that. I mean, imagine if they developed a secret weapon that we don't know how to make and then they declassified it. That would be crazy. So no, I'm pretty sure that the only people who know the exact formula of how this thing operates.
No, can someone bring me up to speed on this, like, because I don't know much about this. Can you prevent me all the facts, Ray or Klaus?
Oh, I guess so. I mean, all the facts that exist have been already presented in a news cycle already at this point. So I guess I'll just tell you the story from the beginning. I mean, they're in the town and they're in a restaurant. I think it's called Zizi or something. And somehow people start having these symptoms and they find the former Russian spy and his daughter collapsed on a park bench. And the policeman who approaches them also becomes ill as well. And so everyone ends up in the hospital and they realize obviously they've been hit by a nerve agent, which means that a chemical weapon has actually been used inside the United Kingdom the first time since, well, a long time that a chemical weapon has been used in Western Europe.
All right, I found what I was thinking. I don't know why I thought declassification. I was thinking of disclosure of the fact that they had produced them. Yeah, I don't know why I thought that meant declassification. I just reread what I was going through in my head. But in terms of like in terms of like how this was coordinated, do you think like the fact that do you think the attack was more of a, I mean, this is all speculation at this point, but do you think this is like more like lower elements in the Russian government? Like, I mean, or do you think that this is an actual sign of aggression from the administration?
I'm interpreting it as a
Like, do you
sign of
think
aggression because
that
to get the chemical weapon out of wherever it is they've got them stored, like it'd be no trivial matter for someone to, like, I don't think someone could just saunter out of there without the approval of the Kremlin with one of their most secretive chemical weapons. I don't think that's going to happen. And so I think it comes right from the top, and that the reason they chose to do it that way, rather than just smuggling in a weapon in multiple parts and shooting at him with it, for example, I think the reason they went with that instead was because of the fact that, one, it is a gruesome way to attempt to kill people, and it causes a lot of collateral damage potentially. Because, like, what if like a group of school children had approached the area instead of a policeman, for example?
Mm-hmm.
There would have been real problems. And
right.
well, I mean, it was already a problem, but you know what I mean? It would have been an even larger problem. They just didn't care about the collateral. And also because of the fact that it's going to be a signature, choosing a weapon that only they have, that would seem to be they were trying to sign that as themselves, so that there would be no doubt among other defectors from Russia that basically Russia will come for you if you think about defecting to a side that has greater civil liberties than those you can experience in Russia. That's basically that's basically the signature they're trying to send.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That I do. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. I mean, like, I guess what I was trying to ask was, and that I'm not saying that I think this. I'm just trying to ask: was this like, I guess, just a some bad idea that someone lower in a position of the government had? You know, but it does make sense that a Novichok agent would not be accessible to lower members of the government without, higher up approval of any kind of coordinated attack.
Exactly. I mean, Russia has has a vertical of power. Nothing happens
Right.
without the knowledge of the Kremlin. Nothing significant, I should say, happens without the knowledge of the Kremlin. It is possible
Right.
to have people acting autonomously at lower levels, and then the Kremlin covering for them belatedly afterwards. But it certainly wouldn't happen in the case of someone using a chemical weapon. That would have to have been explicitly signed off on before it happened.
Right. So I saw you posting about invoking Article 5 of NATO in response. Like, what do you think is an appropriate, like, NATO response to this activity? Like, specifically, I mean, I know I Article 5 can kind of be interpreted to mean a lot of different things. So I didn't really know where you were going with it, but
yeah, from what you would do first is, after invoking Article 5, because then you'd have everyone with you at that point, saying that an attack on one is an attack on all, then you go with targeted sanctions, or perhaps even sectoral-based sanctions, more of them than already exist. Make sure you get everyone on the same page on this.
What could you realistically sanction Russia for, though? I mean, like, in 2018, what could you realistically sanction Russia for? I mean, the West.
You go after their assets, which they have parked in multiple locations, particularly in the city of London. Just freeze them and confiscate them. Also, other things you can do is begin deliberately disfavoring bids made by Russian companies on energy projects and so on. I mean, that's already happening anyway, but I mean, do it even more. And you'd be able to get away with it because of the fact that they won't be able to argue that, WTO rules or anything like this, because, once you have them under sanctions and you vote NATO Article 5, then, all, what's the word for it? The entire concept of trade is off the table. And so you could put them into all kinds of economically disadvantageous positions. There are counter arguments people have to this, which is that they would claim that if you do that to Russia, you're forcing them to rely more and more upon China, right? But that's not necessarily a bad thing either, because a Russia which is reliant upon China is a Russia that becomes even weaker. So it's actually the intention to pin them between the European Union on the one side and factory Asia on the other, because there's no way that Russia can get out of that so long as Europe continues to maintain sanctions or increases them further.
So Russia. So you, in your eyes, Russia being more reliant on China will be a good thing, and will be ultimately be a net good.
yes, it would be a net good because China would continue to defang them and make Russia even weaker. Because obviously China has no particular interest or love for Russia in and of itself because there are no friends, only interests, right? So from China's perspective, that's just an opportunity to build the Silk Road into the Central and Southeast Europe through Central Asia, eroding Russian influence there while they're being starved of the ability to conduct their finances in a normal fashion. Because, I mean, think about it. We take no actions against China whatsoever. We take all of these actions against Russia. That's obviously going to put them in a structurally very bad position. So that's one thing that you can do, which is already supposed to be done, but you do it harder. You can go with cyber attacks, for example. Obviously, don't literally come out and say we're engaged in cyber warfare against Russia, but you just basically get the Dutch involved because they've been there before, and have them lead on this perhaps. Because, I mean, they've literally been inside the Russian stuff before. So, maybe you should, this is the good thing about Article 5 is that, everyone gets to play a part. And so everyone gets to be special, right? There's this, I know, there's this view that, when you talk about NATO, we mean the United States. Increasingly, NATO really actually means Western Europe. But, you've got to sort of broaden, you've got to sort of really, broaden the meaning of this. Because there are 20, how many people are in NATO again? I've forgotten the number suddenly. Is it 29 countries?
Yeah, I think it's around 30, yeah.
Yeah, 29, 30 countries, for example, right? So, I mean, everyone should be able to contribute something, and those pooled resources are better than having, like, than Russia being able to have sort of, picking and choosing which particular member of NATO it's going to fight today. Invoking Article 5 would mean, okay, you've got to take on all of them now. Another thing that can be done, oh yes, domestic effects. The domestic effects of invoking Article 5 are key as well, because then suddenly everything that you do in terms of the conversations that you have with your people then become valid as well, because under Article 5, anything goes. I mean, and by anything goes, I don't mean being irresponsible, but I mean the thing it enables you to say things that previously you weren't able to say. For example, the last time Article 5 was invoked was on September 11th, 2001.
Yeah.
And, that was a time when it was possible for people to say things that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to say. So, for example, under an Article 5 scenario, perhaps if you're in the Czech Republic, for example, it would be possible then to start looking at certain individuals with connections to Russia and begin saying, okay, well, now that we're in an Article 5 style situation, scrutinizing what your connections are and see if you really should be holding the position that you hold in this particular office, for example. So it could be possible then to use that as a way to roll back many of the, I guess you could say, Russian gains that they've had in recent elections, because you can essentially paralyze those governments which are not on board because of the fact that these people will be in violation of what they're expected to do and what they're obligated to do. Another thing that can be done, oh yes, there's also the social effect of this as well, which is that Europe has not yet engaged in a task where everyone has decided to do something together against a common enemy. Europe so far, I mean, since the Eurozone has been established, has lacked a common enemy. Even Islamic terror has not entirely caused that, because of the fact that that is not a traditional nation state that they're fighting against. So people have this mentality that they're fighting against, like criminals who are among them and stuff like this. But facing off against Russia and actually accomplishing something would be the first time that Europeans actually did something together since Napoleon.
I don't know. I'm not really too comfortable forcing the Russian to be relying on China. I think they should be more dependent on Western governments.
Well, but that is what Russia wants as well. Because now that they've gotten sick of the fact that they're pinned into a sort of tiger's cage with China, they would like to have back that kind of Western relationship, which is why they keep trying to get these leaders in that are pro-Russian all over the place, because they try to break out of the trap. So I think we certainly should not allow them to escape from that trap. Like, why would you just give them what they want there?
Why not? They have oil.
That's the thing that's on my mind.
Plenty of other people also have it, because, I mean, think about it. Oil and gas also involve...
Who, Saudi Arabia?
No, but I mean, oil and gas also involve having, political stances also. So, like, why would you want to allow... Like, I mean, why would you want to allow them to have that say-so inside of your society when they're being a disruptive element? Like, it's not like they're coming to you as friends.
I mean, Russia isn't really, in terms of the United States, they're not really being as much of a. It's more of a threat to Europe than it is to the United States.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, when I mean that, I mean to Europe. I mean, the United States is literally an ocean away, so obviously they're never going to directly feel the threat, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's easy. It's easy for the Americans to be like, oh, well, I don't see any problem with what Russia's doing, like literally everywhere adjacent to Russia. And so, I mean, easy for them to say.
Sure.
No, I think if I was living in Europe, I'd probably echo the same sentiment I have right now. Like I still think Russia need to be more dependent on the West than on the Pacific. Just
I honestly think that there is something to. And I mean, I know China is no lover of Russia, but I definitely think there is something to the idea that Russian culture is more oriented with the Eurasia kind of plate than everywhere else on the planet.
I'm slightly skeptical. I'm slightly skeptical of this. I kind of feel like what Russia is basically is people who are in fact Europeans who have simply annexed the entirety of Siberia, Kamchatka, and the Kuril Islands, and are basically sitting on top of them. And so I would say that, I guess, 5/8 of Russian territory is essentially just their colonial land. And so, no, I don't really see Russia as being part of Asia per se. Like, they're only in Asia in the sense that, like, it's kind of like they're in Asia in the sense that, like white South Africans.
I'm saying in essence more part of Asia than they could possibly be of the West. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have a different view of that, but I think that they are actually they have a better chance of earning the trust of anywhere in the East than in the West, than at least in immediate Europe.
Well, I agree on that, but I mean, it's kind of like that's almost like it's a difficult comparison to make because they have almost no chance of winning any trust in the East. So I mean, yeah, I guess they have even less than no chance of winning it in the West. I mean, even this concept they came up with Eurasianism, for example, the joke is that it's all Euro and no Asian. Right? I mean, that's basically what it is. When you read Dugin, it just seems like a massive excuse to basically install Russian suzerainty over people who are not Russian.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're talking about all this sort of spiritual, metaphysical stuff, and people are kind of just looking at them like, yeah, but you're still not Asian. Like, it's like, I don't know. And also, they only seem to switch on these different forms of pan-identities that Russians oscillate between every 100 years or so, if you look at the pattern of history, depending on which strategy they happen to be pursuing at any given time. So, for example, they'll be coming out with Eurasianism right now because of the fact that they're worried about their position in Central Asia vis-a-vis China, right? And vis-a-vis India, and vis-a-vis Iran, even though they're allied with Iran, supposedly, and vis-a-vis other Western powers which are involved in Central Asia, right? So now suddenly they're like, oh, well, Eurasianism, etc., etc. And then if you rewind just a little bit, then you find Russians talking about pan-Slavism, for example, where, they claim to feel a bond with people in the Balkans and people in Poland and so on and so forth, which, of course, we know is actually false.
Yeah, I do. I mean, they definitely don't I mean, Russia has a very, very spelled out history of not being clear about their motives and kind of just hiding behind ideology. I think more so than any other place in the world.
Yes.
Can you give the historical context of relationship between China and Russia?
What?
Yes, I can. But it's going to have bias because obviously, if my take on it is going to have bias. But okay,
it doesn't matter.
Okay, the first interaction between China and Russia, if you scroll really far back in history, was when Russian explorers, and I use explorers with gigantic quotation marks around them, when Russian explorers were going eastward through Siberia and reached somewhere around the Amur River. Upon approaching towns in those locations, people used to run away from the Russians because of the fact that they figured that these people were going to kill them. Turns out they were right, of course. And so the first interaction between Chinese people and Russians was basically a mass murder event. in which basically Russians just turned up, looked around, and were like, "Oh, people who don't look like us," and then just killed everyone. So that was probably a bad start. The annexations and so on that went on during that time period, where basically, you woke up the next morning and found basically there's a new power afoot and it's basically just cutting its way through the forest toward you, then obviously they were never really happy with that. From that perspective, you can actually look at everything that happened after Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great? Yeah, everything that happened after Catherine the Great as being sort of one solid continuum of Russian expansionism. Because people often say, "Oh, why is everyone so upset with Russia?" Well, I mean, if you look at the map, the place is actually massive. And it didn't just like emerge like that. It didn't just come out of the ground with those borders. It was continually expanded over the course of 180 years or so. Well, slightly more than that, actually. 300 years or so. Something like this. Since 1533 to present. So actually 460 something years. Sorry. Yeah. 460 something years of continuous expansion. And so, yeah, they've made a lot of enemies. This can also explain the Sino-Soviet split, for example. The Sino-Soviet split was a split in ideology, but it was a split in ideology which was mediated by geographic realities, which is why there was this thing called the Winter War, where they exchanged fire with each other, and why the ideological differences ended up with descriptions of Russia as Soviet social imperialism and things like this, for example. I mean, lots of the narratives about Russia.
The Winter War was a bit more of just an exchange of fire.
Yeah, it was a brief exchange of fire, but it showed a hostility because of the way that it was talked about.
Well, yeah, it was.
If you look at the way that Chinese people talked about it, then suddenly you understand what their motive is, because they believe that the land across from outside of China's border is not actually Russia. And when you realize that that was their narrative, then it all starts to connect back over 500 years, and it begins to make sense as to what they're thinking. Because often when people look at China, they forget to actually check what China thinks about the event itself. Instead of just saying, okay, well, this event happened and then this happened. Often the story they tell themselves afterwards is more important almost than the actual outcome of the fight itself, because then it gives you an idea of what they're going to do next. Also, one of the things that people use to self-deceive on this is that they started to see a complete rift between modern China and China that existed 500 years ago. That kind of rift is not really, what's the word for it? The rift is not real, because it's still the same people. Like in 1949...
I'm sorry, could you elaborate on that?
Okay, well, I'll put it this way. In 1949, it was not like a new nation was created in the place where China presently is.
Right.
They're still the same people. They still have the same historical memory.
Okay, yeah. I didn't understand what you meant by that at first. But yeah, I certainly agree.
Interesting case. The reason why I'm so worried about Russia being more dependent on China, because there's just one thing that everybody wants in the world, just is oil. That's just a simple thing for me. Like, you think that concern is valid or not, or?
It is a valid concern. It's just that I don't know why you would choose the least productive person to back in that scenario then. Like, if you think that natural resources is the big deal here, and I guess it is to some extent, then why would you not want that to be allocated to the most efficient groups possible?
Who are the most efficient groups possible?
Well, it's certainly not Russia, is it? Because, I mean, they're literally a rent seeker who's camping out on top of land and then charging you for the privilege of interacting with them. What does Russia make?
Nothing.
Exactly. So this is why it's become so mysterious to me to find, like, people doing, sort of head over heels defenses of Russia. They're essentially an obstacle, right? Like, I mean, hypothetically speaking, it would be scandalous for me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, right? But hypothetically speaking, imagine if you could just extract Russian natural, quote unquote, Russian natural resources without having to actually pay Russians for it. Would anyone even notice the difference?
I might notice a casting.
No, I mean,
The
obviously the Russians would notice the difference because they would no longer be collecting rents on stuff that they've occupied, obviously. But I think for everyone else, I mean, would anyone else be upset? And I ask this question not because I'm advocating literally just taking stuff from them literally now or something, but I'm just using it as a thought experiment to show that basically this is what rent seeking is. The fact that the only thing that Russians do is essentially they sit on top of natural resources and then charge you for the fact that they've drawn a line around them. If it were not for that, then what other claim would they have on these things? It's not like they're actually using them for something. Because Russia doesn't actually
kind of
produce
just
anything
what property
itself.
is.
No, but I mean, Russia doesn't produce anything itself.
For the world, or
for the world, or even for themselves for that matter, because I guess they're importing all of their consumer goods anyway. So I mean, it's completely ridiculous. They might as well.
Which country is working for the whole world?
Just about everyone else has stuff that they do that is internationally recognizable, and the reason I ask this is not because I'm saying that you would just go in there and bust the place up, but I'm saying that like why would people be concerned about Russia losing its strategic position? Like, it's not that they're doing something for you. It'd be almost like saying that, it'd be really bad if it'd be almost like saying that it'd be really bad if Saudi Arabia was to lose out tomorrow. Would it really be? Like, I mean, if they're gonna go down, unless you have some really strategic reason for not allowing them to go, then
I guess I just don't understand why the question is being posed in the way that it is. I mean, like.
No, but I'm assuming that if you but I'm assuming that if you're not from a particular place, but you're defending that place, there must be some thing that you think you're getting from them.
But you're overstating the defense of it. But you're overstating the defense of it. I mean, people aren't. I mean, there are people that are like insane about Russia, sure, but I mean, I don't really see as much. I mean, even in the United States, I don't see like just a crazy amount of like, we must defend Russia at all costs in any kind of political discourse. I think it's just like more or less to the right of neutral. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, you bring up the comparison of Saudi Arabia. Like, who would care about Saudi Arabia? I mean, I think that there's more or less the same approach going on. Like, people, I mean, Saudi Arabia. I mean, we basically just don't want to engage with them because we're afraid that any kind of deal, at least people outside of the political establishment in the United States, we don't want to be engaged with them because we see funding Saudi Arabia as creating more political instability in the Middle East, and thereby, increasing the amount of foreign policy reliance that Israel has on the United States. I mean, that's the whole beef with Saudi Arabia. But I mean, it's not like nobody wants to trade with them.
Exactly.
It's not like nobody wants. It's not like nobody wants them to, to rent seek.
No, but what I mean by this is, okay, it would be like to make a direct comparison between the way that that Voltaire is arguing here, it'd be as if I said, who cares if Saudi Arabia loses its relative position in the regional order, and then Voltaire was like, quote, semi-quote, because it's not really a quote, it'd be hypothetical quote, if he were to tell me that that he doesn't like the idea of Saudi Arabia losing out to Qatar because Qatar might export so much liquid natural gas, and if we convert more of our energy mix to natural gas, it would be very disadvantageous to Saudi Arabia. So which my response would be, who cares, right?
I don't follow. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I'll do it again. The tension between Qatar and Saudi Arabia is one that basically everyone in here like gets already, so I don't have to explain that, right? So the direct comparison would be almost like a tension between China and Russia. Like, why would you not? Why would you be? I mean, as in, why would Voltaire be uncomfortable with China getting one over on Russia, for example? I mean, that would be almost like being uncomfortable with Qatar getting one over on Saudi Arabia. Like, why would anyone?
Well, I think that both Russia's and China's interests are more or less diametrically opposed to the United States, but I think Russia's would be probably closer, would they not? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Right.
It depends on who. The United States is complicated because it depends on, to answer that question, it depends on who's in control of the US, doesn't it? Like, I guess, like, if your president is Donald J. Trump, then yeah, I guess you're closer to Russia than you are to China. But if your president were hypothetically Hillary Clinton, it would be the other way around.
True. Yeah.
And so it depends on what you're trying to. It depends also on what you're trying to accomplish. And so when I say that obviously letting China get one over on Russia is better, it's because I'm assuming that you're intending to maintain the order which had been produced since the 1960s. Or I should say maintain and expand on the order that had been produced since the 1960s and not do any kind of radical reorientation of how America operates. And so there's that. But I mean, for Europe, the question is actually significantly easier, because for Europe, the answer is China every single time anyway. Because I don't think anyone in Central or Eastern Europe is going to say no to Chinese investment. And the net effect of accepting that Chinese investment and the net effect of allowing the Silk Road and Belt to increase European prosperity in this way is that it lessens the amount to which China could be an adversary later on, because as we all know, when you're invested in something, it makes you significantly less likely to attack that thing. And so, and also the fact that China actually provides goods for the world, which have been very useful to people. So there's also that upside as well. Whereas with Russia, you don't get any of this. With Russia, you get instability and rent seeking. Like, so I don't understand how you put these two things on the scale and are like worried about China as opposed to being worried about Russia. Russia is more of the loose cannon here. China is constrained by the fact that it actually has to be responsible with the things that it has initiated. Russia has no reason to be responsible because Russia doesn't actually have anything that it's necessarily worried about in Europe. Which is why they're able to do the kind of things that they've been doing. For example, who was the last person in Europe to attempt a coup in Montenegro? That was Russia. That was not China. Russia was willing to kill perhaps hundreds, thousands of Montenegrins in order to have a coup there. And only by luck were they interrupted before they could begin it. And then Lavrov came in, spirited away the people who would have been responsible for it, and escaped. That was in 2014. And so I don't understand how people are saying that obviously, you know, China is not some kind of angel or something, but comparatively speaking, China has not come up in your face basically and threatened to kill you directly. It is in fact Russia which has done that.
Just with China, I think they kind of have a history of deception, you know, just hiding what their real goals are.
I mean, Russia is definitely guilty of that for sure. I think probably to a greater extent, though.
Yeah. Like, I mean, that's the thing that I don't understand about the China craze either. Like, I mean, obviously you don't let down your guard toward, like, you know, random persons, for example. So, like in the South China Sea, for example, you keep your guard up when faced with China because of the fact that, you know, if you give them an inch, they may in fact take a mile and then you'll regret it. So obviously, you know, you behave sensibly. But I don't get where the idea of this, like, reputational thing with China comes from. I mean, historically speaking, China has been a country that rolls over every single time you kick at it, actually. Like, I mean, how many times was China occupied since the year, what, 1750?
Oh, right.
I mean, these guys are historical losers, actually, so I'm not even sure where that comes from.
It's just their mentality that they present, since they view themselves as Middle Kingdom, as pretty much a world empire already.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know that they actually perceive themselves that way. I mean, the last time that they pretended that they were that way, they got beat by a bunch of Vietnamese peasants, for example, and that was in, what was it, 18 something? Those guys with the black flags, whose name I've forgotten now, where they went down there to the territory which was not called Vietnam at that time, but was effectively territory which I guess would be the people who presently comprise Vietnam, and lost there. They faced, they also faced people from South Asia being led by British officers and lost then too. They faced a coalition of multiple groups of people, including Japanese, lost then also. I don't know where this sort of reputation of like Chinese perfidy versus the West has actually come from, because up until, I mean, this era that we're in, post 1949, is like the first time that China's actually been not losing. Like, I mean, okay, maybe I'm not going back far enough. So if we go back before 1750, like, when was China facing the West at any point? And actually doing something?
As far as it comes, as far as my knowledge goes, nothing.
Exactly. So I don't even know where this narrative comes from. I mean, technically speaking, Western people have faced India and Japan more often than they have actually faced China as an adversary.
I don't know. Maybe it's an ancient Chinese secret that no one is telling us why we should be afraid of China. Maybe that's why.
And I'm not even saying this is like a China apologist or something. I'm just saying that I genuinely don't get how they became this sort of, you know, the central thing to be worried about. It's kind of weird in a way.
Well,
it is almost like a friend of mine put it this way. It is almost like people have taken a concerted effort to inflate Chinese egos. Because I suppose if Chinese people had been watching this from the outside, they would start to get really, really enormous egos, because they would think that, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Everyone seems to be afraid of China for some reason.
Well, just the fact they're just really progressing, they're just progressing like relatively fast, and just the way that they're progressing seems to be rather scary.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it probably has something to do with. I mean, you even stated earlier, you know, they're basically Europeans. They're Europeans that like to think of themselves as Asian. I think that probably has something to do with it as well.
What, you mean Russians?
Yeah. No, I'm saying in terms of how they are trusted over Chinese.
Oh, right. Yes.
Whereas the Chinese are kind of, they don't really. Yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's the racialized politics basically that has come to the fore recently, where Russians are perceived as quote fellow white people to other white people at this point, which would explain a lot. It's almost like
I would say that's a recent thing, but
it's almost like well, I mean, it was always perceived this way, but I mean, it has come up as a what's the word for it? It's come up as a more overriding factor than before. Whereas previously, I think Europeans used to draw lines amongst themselves in this way, and would say, okay, well, these are the ones we like and these are the ones we don't like. And then everyone was able to go along with this. And they would also obviously have during the days of the British Raj, for example, this was quite easy to explicate to other people who are, I guess you could say, people of color, for example. It's much easier to explicate this to them, because I guess you'd say like British people would come to you and say, okay, well, we have a shared enemy. And I'd be like, oh, okay, well, what is that enemy? Oh, it's the Russians. Oh, of course, exactly. And so then you have a case of Western Europeans with people who are not Western versus Russia, which seems to actually be a consistent pattern throughout history, which is obviously, you know, part of the Russian psyche, to the extent that there's a scarred Russian psyche. It's that they have a distrust of the West because Russia has this kind of, or at least religious Russians in particular, have this kind of little grudge that they hold, because they believe that Western Europeans are supposed to cooperate with Russians because of a shared set of values under Christendom or something, except no one ever actually does this. And so they're perpetually upset about the fact that this cooperation that they thought was supposed to happen on the basis of religion never happened ever. After all, I mean, was it not the British Empire and France that even sided with the Ottoman Empire against Russia?
Yeah.
So it's almost like, you know, they're extremely upset that basically the West will side with literally anything against Russia. The Ottoman Empire, the Japanese Empire, various Central Asian warlords, literally anything. I mean, obviously, from my perspective, that's quite fun. But I'm assuming that from the Russian perspective, they're probably not enjoying it quite as much.
I'm not trying to be a Russian apologist or anything. I'm just saying that, just in my mind, I just think it's a more rational position. I think a more rational choice to actually just build relations between Russia, just structurally weakening them.
Well, it's one of those things that when you're talking about, are you familiar with Mackinder?
No.
And his commentary on the pivot space, which occurs in Central Asia and the lower part of Siberia, that whoever controls this space, which intersects with the Balkans actually, so it's actually it's part of what they call now the arc of instability, because if you extend it far enough, it actually extends into the Middle East and North Africa as well. But whoever controls this space has can have the potential to become the predominant decision maker on the planet, right? And so when you're making that kind of calculation and there's a conflict over the pivot space, it becomes almost zero sum in the sense that you can't have multiple winners if there's a finite amount of land and a finite number of persons who can control particular geographical positions. So, I mean, you can't, how can I put this? I mean, classical liberals like to assume that somehow everyone can win at everything. Sometimes you can't just go handing out participation awards to literally everyone. At some point, when it comes to when it comes to Central Asia, Siberia, and that extension of the arc of instability across the Middle East and North Africa, at some point you have to make a choice as to which people you're siding with and which people you're just not going to assist. If there's an antagonistic contradiction, you can't just say I choose neither, because that means that someone else will decide it for you.
What do you think of the equator thesis, like that? The equator will become more of a favorable geographic location in terms of power seeking, because of how useful it is for space travel and things like that. Have you heard of that at all? Or
I have heard of this, which means that you'd have probably, I guess, great power Brazil one day, but I'm not entirely confident of this. But I mean, let's say that it could happen. I mean, that is quite distant. On a time scale, I think that's quite distant because, we don't have, what's the word for it? We don't have space station politics yet. But I mean, I guess if we did, then yes, the equator would become very important at that point. Or at least places that are closer to the equator will become important.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's not like Mexico is going to, become like a global hegemon or anything. Basically, just whoever controls Mexico.
Oh,
I suppose. I would say that if the equator does become important, it would not supplant the idea of the pivot space, because I would assume that whoever it is that's going to be utilizing the equator in this way would be someone who has already won the pivot space, and thus is not in the threat of having their stuff intercepted by someone else.
Yeah, that does actually make more sense.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh man.
I don't know. This has been really interesting.
Not sure this was the original question, though, was it? Don't know how we ended up on this. I actually can't even remember. I'm sure you guys actually told me a couple of days ago what the actual question was. It's just I had forgotten it.
Wait, the Jewish question?
No, as in the actual question being the question for this interview.
The actual question is the German question, Walt. The Jewish question is 19th century.
But I want to talk about the Jewish question though. No one wants to talk about them for some odd reason, Goyim.
See, you're just with each of these streams, you're becoming more and more like Goebbels. It's pretty profound.
Yeah.
Like Goebbels? I'm not becoming an anti-Semite.
So what answer to the Jewish question do you have if you're not anti-Semitic?
I don't know. I just feel like historically speaking, the Jews never have any type of homeland or national or country till recently, and I feel like they sort of been like free riders in each country they've been and severely punished because of that.
Settle
Oh my
down there.
God, I am becoming like girls.
Yeah, and also I think that from their perspective, they would not characterize themselves in that way at all because they believe that they provide goods and services to people.
Yeah, but they seem like they provide like the worst
I
kind.
don't really think that they be like provide anything beyond like cell phone technology. To be honest, anything useful at least.
No, just.
I mean, speaking specifically of Israel, I don't see it.
No, just on the Jewish question. Well, I don't think there's actually just a question. I just think, historically speaking, the Jews haven't just been there. I just feel like they're just like
Volt, before you say something that is gonna get this video flagged, I'm going to find out what that original topic was,
Okay.
so that we don't just get into Kevin McDonald posting over here.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything too controversial over here.
Wasn't it something like?
Do we have an original topic?
Wasn't it something like stuff that Klaus believes?
Stuff.
It really was as broad as that.
Wait, can we talk about the Negro question?
That was a question?
Isn't that answered already? I mean, for the most part.
Well, I know I have no. I don't know. I don't know. I have any civilization or great history to talk about in Africa, but I can.
You got Egypt, man.
But I can. But I can. What I can is criticize other civilizations, such as the West, the Sinos, the Japanese, the Russians. Just I can criticize for their own weaknesses.
I mean, I wouldn't
I'm not
be
sure why
worried
you're
about
saying
being in that position, man, because I'm basically the African of Europe. I'm both Irish and German, so I'm just yeah.
I don't know, like the German,
It's gross.
at least the Germans have contributed to hierarchy and meritocracy and really, really great family units.
Also, the Irish people have produced a lot of revolutionary theory, and they produced Michael Collins. Like, I mean, I think you should get some kind of award for having Michael Collins come from among you.
And
I don't know. What do you mean revolutionary theory? Like beyond who's Irish? Is Mark Fisher Irish?
No, I mean in terms of if you're in a position where you do not have independence, how to get it. Ireland has been very good on that level. Like, I mean, the extent to which people in the global south have essentially relied on a lot of the innovations of Michael Collins to basically figure out how you gradually get to a position without turning into some kind of without just being a bunch of violent idiots with no goal, for example. I mean, he was extremely intelligent.
Too far above that level, to be honest, in practice at least.
I mean, he was extremely intelligent, and so I don't think that people should I don't know. I don't think people should be down on Irish people in this way, because
no, I'm not too down on Irish. I mostly disagree with the I guess stereotype of Irish people. I don't see it so much in reading their literature and their history and everything, but I don't know. I got it. It's mostly like, I mean, the world kind of views Ireland, and I guess I would identify more with my German side than my Irish side. I mean, my German side is, I guess, what I know a lot more about, and I'm there is a chance that I am related by some distance to Johann Gottfried Herder, who is,
wow.
I don't know if you guys, do you know who that is?
maybe not. Can you tell me who that is?
He was basically idealist philosopher, like student of Kant. Um, one of the like first guys to uh, basically talk about the influence of language on the process of reasoning, and that's that kind the kind of implications that has for nation building and all sorts of things. But
Well,
anyways, yeah. So I mean, I mostly identify with that kind of side of my family history, but yeah, the Irish are definitely kind of viewed by the whole world in the same way that the British Empire viewed them. Like, I mean, there is some truth to the stereotype, but I don't think it's as bad as people think it is.
and on the Anglos, they once ruled the world, now destroying themselves, and hey, at least they gave birth to liberal. At least they gave birth to classical liberalism and pretty much property rights. So, yeah.
Well, I'll give a quotation. I'll give a quotation. So give me 1 second. This quotation is from Collins and Intelligence, 1919 to 1923, from Brotherhood to Bureaucracy. I'll just get a quick quote. Quote, the characteristics which mark Collins out as a remarkably successful director of intelligence during the War of Independence include his evident appreciation of the importance of the collection and assessment of information as primary elements of intelligence operations which should precede action, his partial penetration of his adversary's own intelligence system, the efficiency and ruthlessness with which action based on good intelligence was taken, and his success in preserving the security and efficiency of his own organization, both in Dublin and in Britain, despite the pressures it operated under because of the constant threat of raids, arrest, and the capture of documents. I mean, he was, yeah, he was really good at that sort of stuff before it was actually trendy to be good at that sort of stuff. And so he was it wasn't like it's not how people portray Ireland in comics, where it's kind of like these strange emotional people or something. It was not like that at all. Like, I mean,
speaking of which, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Oh yeah, happy St. Patrick's Day to any Irish people who are listening, including yourself, Klaus, or the half of you listening.
The Irish people, man. Do you have any criticism of the Chinese civilization?
Well, right? I mean, naturally, I do.
What's your criticism of the Chinese?
How do I not be politically incorrect now?
Why would you want to do that?
No, so you got to phrase these things appropriately. Otherwise, people are just going to snip out the thing that you said and then like pin it on you forever. Yes, if there is one criticism that I would give right now, which is a very pertinent criticism for now, it's the fact that there is entirely too much naive trust sometimes in the leadership of the Communist Party of China. For example, we saw I think it was within the last 24 to 48 hours, we saw about 2,980 something delegates go in and basically say that it's okay if Xi Jinping decides that he wants to be president for yet another term, right? I think they're placing too much trust in him. And this is something which is a chronic problem, which you can see spanning much of Chinese history, which is this almost inclination to reward good leaders by giving them just enough power that they can become bad leaders.
Sound like the bad emperor problem, as Fukuyama would describe.
Yeah, I guess you could call it the bad emperor problem. They keep doing it, and it's kind of annoying to see it happen. I mean, they had a real opportunity there to demonstrate a higher level of maturity, and they have totally missed it. Who knows what might happen next? Hopefully not something bad.
Who knows? And let's see. My criticism of the Chinese society is I think they're generally low trust. The low trust society. Just also.
I don't think they need trust though.
What do you mean?
What?
What do you mean? Like, I just think they're just a low.
I think they care more about authority than trust, than trusting people. They care more about respect and authority than trusting people,
Hmm.
and even trusting that authority.
Maybe that's a criticism of his own then.
I mean, it's not. I don't mean for it to be a criticism. I think it's just an observation.
Just also just also more so, I think they're very racist. The Chinese people or just Asian people in general, I think they're pretty racist. You know.
Well, I've got one more Collins quote here that I actually forgot to read off because there was two of them that I was supposed to do, so I'll just quickly put this one in as well. This quote being from a book called Irish Nationalism, A History of Its Roots and Ideology, which again says, quote, realists appealed to Collins. There would be no more glorious protests in arms, he had decided. He built a cadre of realists around him, first in the IRB, then at the volunteer headquarters, where he took over Pierce's old post as director of the organization before becoming director of intelligence. Finally, in Dail Iran, as the underground government's very effective minister for finance. Collins was a doer, essentially a well-informed opportunist with very few scruples. His entire ideology could be stated in 5 words. The Irish should govern themselves. And so you can see why, obviously, he is regarded very highly around the world because of the fact that
and it's
much
interesting
of he wrote
it's
down.
interesting that like they use opportunist in a positive, with a positive connotation to the word. I mean, like when in Western political discourse, we think of opportunists as snakes. And I mean, well, I think that that's not always true all the time, but like, and you can look at like Trump, and then like I think his base, like for the most part, agrees that he's an opportunist, but they see it as kind of as a positive quality. But,
unfortunately,
yeah, I mean, like
Trump
you
is the
don't
kind
see
of
as much of that
opportunist.
in like other Western countries. Sorry, what?
Yeah, unfortunately, though, Trump is the kind of opportunist who is motivated by something entirely different than what Collins is motivated by, and so that's the part they've forgotten.
No doubt, yeah.
Yeah, man, Russia. Oh,
I mean, I think it's a personal will to power, whereas Collins was probably more motivated by just a nationalism in general. But yeah,
yeah, he viewed himself as acting as kind of like the sword of those around him. I think that one of the last things that he said before he was assassinated or something, one of the last things he wrote down before he was assassinated was, I think he wrote a letter to someone in which he signed it off with the Irish people are absolutely wonderful. Apparently that was the last thing that he wrote. And so, yeah, I think he did see himself as kind of like an expression of their will as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah. I think that with and not, this is not even exclusive to Trump. I mean, there are definitely people who gain their will to power in America in similar ways. I think they like to. I think their will to power is achieved through giving the impression that they are the will of people, but obviously that's not so much the case. But yeah.
One other thing I'll get in there on as well, because Voltaire has said this repeatedly, and I haven't actually addressed it yet, even though it was done in this conversation actually. When you said that Africa has produced no great civilizations, right? I'm not sure that's actually correct. Like, I mean, obviously you're about to counter me by saying, of course, that that Ptolemaic Egypt was actually a Macedonian civilization. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about, though. I mean East Africa. Like, if you look at Asian history, for example, you'll see that there's an extensive time period up to about 1750 something in which apparently East Africa is supplying ships and various other wondrous items that are being continually traded, right? So, like, where are these items coming from if there's no civilization in Africa? Like, obviously we quote unquote did not get to actually meet these people, so we don't know the ins and outs of how these things operated, but it's clear there was something in East Africa that was producing things for them to have appeared on these boats constantly. So what's going on there? Explain that.
High
IQ. I don't think that's.
I mean, it seems to indicate to me there must have been African civilizations during that time.
I wouldn't call that civilization, though. I mean, well, there is a degree of a soft form of complexity and division of labor. But I mean, I think, I think, well, I mean, and I'm not trying to like encourage Voltaire to be down on himself or anything. But I think he's comparing Africa to other historical civilizations in scale. I mean, because civilization is just complex society. There's no this is civilization and this isn't. You basically can just kind of view societies by differing levels of complexity. I think what he's trying to say is that Africa by far has had a far my words are getting tangled up. Has had way less complexity in society.
Well, I mean, you have to have, I mean, during that time period, they would have had to have had a sufficient level of complexity to be at the level where they've got diverse items appearing on ships which are defended, right? Because I mean,
I thought you said just ships.
Yeah, no, they had items that were obviously being sold. Otherwise, what would be the point of trading with them, right? They were the ones essentially selling things to along the Indian route and East Asia's route, which was actually connected to the same route at that time period. Those routes were eventually broken because eventually the Europeans came around the Horn of Africa, obviously, and found out that there was stuff beyond that point, right? And so at that point, then we saw a reconfiguration occur, and then we didn't see them again, right? But
maybe the fact that we haven't seen them is kind of testament to the fact that Africans are best when left to their own devices, or at least not colonized in any in a sense of the word.
Well, that would actually fit into the post-colonial narrative, which is that basically they got interrupted.
Right.
Voltaire doesn't need to be that down on himself, because then he can say that, well, he got interrupted.
No, I'm just not. I'm not that down myself. I just gotta be honest with myself. I cannot see anything. I don't see any type of regression when the European came and conquered. I just see like improvements after the European came. The African people just don't know how to govern themselves at all. Just also just like they also have a horrible tendency to peddle tribalism. That's also one of the problems. They just peddle tribalism. You can even see this in African American communities.
I guess so, but then how is that different from any other parts of the world, though? Like, if you almost like say, oh, you're to a greater degree. No, but I mean, look at the Balkans, for example. The Balkans is keenly has a whole bunch of people who are keenly aware of what they apparently are, and will have infinite fights over these things whenever someone is offended. And then you have to bind them together using institutional frameworks to prevent that from happening. I mean, also there was just 300-400 years ago, it was essentially Britain and France fighting each other every single day. So I don't think that there's some kind of like exception.
Just that.
I don't think that parts of Africa are exceptional in that regard. I mean, the only exception is that it's still happening now. But I mean, I don't think that's the first time anyone has ever done this stuff.
It's just the fact that they don't know how to allocate resources. They seem like what's the good word for this? They seem like they haven't achieved any type of property rights. They always want to export it, just not building upon of that. At this point, I just think there's something inherently wrong with African people, including African Americans. That they're just willing to break down any type of coherent social order. I always revert back to tribalism. Maybe this is the environment, maybe it's due to genetics. I don't know. I just know I don't want to live in Africa.
Okay. Which African country would you say is the best African country then?
Probably South Africa.
What, now?
Nope.
I mean now, obviously.
Wait, let me think on this. Best African country as of right now. Honestly, probably South Africa.
What about Botswana?
Yeah, what about Botswana?
Oh,
What
right.
about-
They have like the.
Yeah, what about
Actually, I think Botswana is pretty decent because they do have some type of system. Like they're pretty. They're somewhat inclusive.
They're doing pretty well.
what about Namibia?
I mean, I haven't heard of that country.
It's literally adjacent to South Africa. Okay, and let me think of another one. What about Nigeria?
No,
Really?
I don't want to be anywhere near Nigeria.
Even though it's one of the highest growth regions, if you exclude the north of the country.
I don't want to live there. I don't want to be there. Deuces, basically. Bye. No Nigeria.
Okay, let me think. It's only sub-Saharan Africa up for consideration, right?
Don't want to live. I don't want to live. I don't want to hunt with spears and speak in tongues and persecute homosexuals.
Why don't you get your skin bleached and like travel back in time and move to Libya?
I don't want to be. I don't want to be like Michael Jackson.
How about Algeria?
No.
You don't want to. What's wrong with Algeria?
Not hearing good things about them. Or I could go to Kenya. Like, Kenya seemed nice.
Okay. Oh yes, I should have actually named Kenya. Yeah. How about Djibouti? No, seriously.
Who's booty?
Oh, I see. Okay.
I think he's literally laughing about that.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Yes, that's probably the safest place. That's probably literally the safest place in Africa because it's like 5 different military powers who are all parked next to you.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know, man. Are you sure that's not Tanzania?
Oh no. Okay. Other than the continent of Africa, let's look at other places. China. I wish I know the regions of China. Dang it, like Pacific region.
The regions.
Yeah, or provinces.
Well, I think we all know the best part of China is actually not in China.
Hong Kong?
Nope. Macau. And of course, the reason why Macau is the best is because of the fact that it's just entirely casinos, or at least that's the stereotype. So yeah, that's the retirement location or something, like, after we've, hopefully finished saving the world or whatever it is we're supposedly doing. I don't know. I just go to Macau or something and just gamble it and just gamble away.
Oh,
but no. I'm obviously half joking there. I'm half joking.
Yeah. Also,
the best part of China is actually Shenzhen.
Shenzhen.
And the reason I think so is obvious, is because it's an industrial center.
Okay.
See, there's the boring answer. That's the boring answer. But the exciting answer is still Macau.
Okay. Now Hong Kong or Taiwan?
Yeah, but everyone says that, right?
Because, well, no,
and plus, Taiwan is not part of China.
They speak the same language, same people.
Yeah, but they write it slightly differently, because Taiwan is writing in traditional Chinese, whereas the People's Republic of China uses simplified Chinese.
Oh. Just, I don't know, like China.
So the writing is ever so slightly different. But still, Taiwan is not China, and it's probably never going to be. I think they're more or less clear on that one.
To people in the United States, they're the same thing, basically.
Okay, let's look at other civilization. The West, quite possibly one of the best, most developed. Actually, I'm just going to say the West is the best. Thanks to Anglo-Saxons and the Germans. and the French and the Italians.
Whoa, 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 whoa! The French.
Yes.
Hold on there, buddy. Hold on.
What? What's wrong with the French?
The way you're posing that question just shows what you've already assumed. You've already assumed about the French.
Come on, there's nothing wrong with the French. Don't you remember Napoleon almost took over Europe? Come on, there's something impressive about that.
You're right, man. I'm just I'm prejudiced. I'm having flashbacks from the Franco-Prussian War. Let's just I'll just put the past behind me.
Okay, Hakuna Matata, whatever. Okay. I don't know, the French.
All right, anyways, I have to get going. It's getting late where I am right now.
Yeah.
So I'll see you guys.
All right.
It was good talking to you.
No, it was good. It was good. Yeah.
All right, I'll see you guys. See you both.
You want to keep on comparing civilizations? Like,
that would probably get us in considerable trouble as we continue to go along, because the more of these comparisons we make, the more fodder will be brought against us later. However, I kind of feel like Klaus had the conversation with us, but then sort of got away without actually answering the original thing. Because your intent was to have me ask him questions on his ideological positions, wasn't it?
probably.
Yeah, except instead you ended up putting questions to me.
Because you're like the most interesting person to talk to.
Oh. So, well, there we are. So I don't know. Are you going? So I don't know whether you want to wrap it up and then like, reconvene at a later date or what?
I don't know. I want to keep on comparing civilizations a little bit more, if you want to.
It's just it's just going to end up with politically incorrect statements being made, which we will be held to account for.
Okay, good point. I think I'm gonna end it here, people, because Ray don't want to be politically incorrect. Remember that. Hold that against her.
I just don't like being crucified.
Come on, you can handle criticism. At least you know how to fight back. I don't know. Well, hope everybody has a good weekend. Thanks, Ray, the Asian, for coming on my stream tonight. And bless me, and bless everybody, and bless the Negro spirit I have in me. Goodbye.